Picture a classic Swiss chalet. Wood grain beams, green shutters, lace curtains catching the breeze. It sits quietly against the alpine tree line, exactly what you would expect from a postcard of a peaceful mountain village. But approach the walls, and the wood grain is actually painted concrete. The windows are sealed optical illusions, and behind those shutters are 7-foot-thick blast walls concealing a fully armed military fortress. Underneath its famously neutral exterior, Switzerland has built an infrastructure of sheer survival. For a population of roughly 8.8 million people, there are over 9 million bunker spots. It is the only country on Earth with enough underground capacity to shelter its entire population, and then some. Declaring neutrality is a piece of paper. Enforcing it requires a nation to weaponize its own geography, turning its idyllic landscapes into a massive hidden machine designed to guarantee independence. In September 1939, Switzerland found itself in an impossible position. War had broken out across Europe, and the small, neutral country was quickly surrounded by hostile Axis powers. To meet the threat of invasion, General Henri Guisan took command. He immediately mobilized 430,000 combat troops and 200,000 reserves, putting a massive portion of the Swiss population in uniform almost overnight. Guisan knew his army could not hold the flat, open borders against German armor. His solution was the National Redoubt. The military strategy called for abandoning the borders entirely and retreating into a heavily fortified ring deep within the Central Alps. The military spent years engineering the terrain to slow down enemy tanks and infantry. They poured endless lines of jagged concrete blocks, nicknamed Toblerones, straight across the rolling valleys. Strategic choke points like rail lines and mountain passes were guarded by hidden artillery. Facilities like Fortress Viergen and disguised chalets were carved directly into the rock faces, perfectly camouflaged against aerial reconnaissance. The military transformed the Alps into a massive, hollowed-out trap. By arming the granite itself, they made a German invasion mathematically too costly to attempt. With the end of the Second World War, the existential threat shifted. The danger was no longer invading infantry, but the invisible, airborne threat of nuclear fallout. In 1963, the Swiss government responded with a sweeping civil protection law. The mandate was simple and total. Every single resident must have access to a nuclear shelter. This legislation physically altered housing construction. If you built a new house, local laws required a reinforced concrete bunker directly beneath your living room. Over the following decades, builders excavated 2,000 kilometers of tunnels and constructed over 300,000 individual fallout shelters across the country. Swiss engineering quickly became the global gold standard for underground defense. Foreign leaders and dictators, including Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, hired Swiss contractors to install heavy blast doors and specialized ventilation systems in their own compounds. Back in Switzerland, citizens integrated these fortresses into daily life. Shelters became wine cellars, archives, and extra storage for groceries, provided the owners kept the ventilation cranks operational and the heavy doors ready for government inspection. Instead of succumbing to Cold War paranoia, the Swiss domesticated the apocalypse. They made surviving a nuclear exchange as routine as maintaining the plumbing. When the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended, the Swiss military shrank its footprint. They left behind millions of square feet of empty, heavily reinforced subterranean voids. Private enterprise soon stepped in to repurpose these spaces for extreme wealth storage. The decommissioned K-20 bunker in the Alps, for instance, holds an estimated 6,000 tons of central bank gold. As physical commodities gave way to the digital economy, the threat landscape evolved. The modern target is data, vulnerable to cyber warfare, corporate espionage, and government seizure. Following disclosures of mass global surveillance programs, data security experts relocated their servers to Switzerland. Operating out of former military redoubts allows these companies to shield client information from foreign legal jurisdictions and bulk data collection. Today, these servers are guarded by retinal scanners, biometric locks, and heavy steel blast doors. The facilities are shielded against electromagnetic pulses and utilize underground alpine water pools to cool the immense heat generated by the racks. The commodity being protected has shifted from human lives to bullion and encrypted data, but the core utility of an impenetrable physical fortress remains exactly the same. Other European nations spent the 1990s dismantling their Cold War shelters. Switzerland kept theirs. With the outbreak of war in Ukraine, that decision to maintain a vast operational shelter network has been firmly validated. Swiss officials do not view the bunkers as relics of past conflicts, but as a permanent, necessary insurance policy. They are in acceptance that the geopolitical landscape is volatile and ultimately unpredictable. Neutrality, in the Swiss sense, is an active physical state of constant preparation. The nation remains at peace because it is permanently, systematically prepared for war.